Hi, Dr. Nigel Giam here, course organiser for MentorMRCGP courses and GP Programme Director for the St Mary's scheme. Welcome back. This is CSA Bitesize Podcast 5, and we are following on into the second half of the consultation, focusing on clinical management skills. What we're going to do is also bring in Competency 2, Global Competency 2, which does not recognise the issues or priorities in the consultation, for example, the patient's problem, agenda, the dilemma of the case. And we're going to tie this into Competency 8, which does not show appropriate use of resources, including aspects of budgetary governance. Competency 9 does not make adequate arrangements for follow-up and safety netting, along with the interpersonal competencies around 12, does not appear to develop rapport or show awareness of the patient's agenda, health beliefs and preferences. Competency 14 does not identify or use appropriate psychological or social information to place the problem in context. And Competency 15 does not develop a shared management plan demonstrating an ability to work in partnership with the patient. So let's start with Competency 15. What does that actually mean, sharing? Sharing, being patient-centered. This does not equate to giving options. That's a real myth in the CSA. I have to give options for every single case that comes in through the door, when actually, realistically, you don't necessarily have options to give. And does that make you patient-centered? It doesn't make you patient-centered. It makes you patient-driven. In fact, what makes you patient-centered is, again, recognizing what Competency 2 encompasses, recognizing the issue, priority in the consultation, and making sure you bring that into the second half of your CSA consultation immediately. So that goes along with Competency 12, showing an awareness of the patient's agenda. So after you've examined a patient, what you want to be doing is bringing in their agenda. If a patient came in, for example, with a headache and they wanted an MRI scan, that's what you want to address first. So let's work through this example. This patient wants this MRI scan because they're really concerned they might have a brain tumour, and hopefully within the narrative of the first half you've recognised that actually the reason they're worried they have a brain tumour is because they know someone who's unfortunately died from a brain tumour recently. Now, you've taken your history and have been reactive to the story, plus the symptom, plus the system, and recognised actually there are no red flags at all. But actually, from a psychosocial perspective, Competency 14, the patient is very anxious, it's stressing them out, it's beginning to affect their work. And the patient really wants to have this MRI scan. So you've examined the patient, there are no red flags on examination, you start readdressing Competency 2 and 12 by saying, Mr. Smith, I appreciate when you came in today, you were very concerned about having something serious like a brain tumour, you're very keen for an MRI scan. I'd like to reassure you at this point that I think it's very unlikely that you've got a brain tumour. Now let's talk about the MRI scan, because I see that you're very keen to have it. Now, the issue I think here, and I think the big challenge that a lot of candidates have, is how to say no. And actually, through negotiation, you need to learn how to say no. Because this patient may not necessarily accept your explanation. They still may demand for an MRI scan. Are you still going to give that? No, because at the end of the day, if you do so, you're going to be going against Competency 8, which does not show appropriate use of resources, including aspects of budgetary governance. Now, the skills that you need to be demonstrating here is how to negotiate a shared management plan. And I'd like you to consider the word dilemma. Because actually every day when you're seeing patients, when patients are coming in wanting something, there is often a dilemma between want versus need. And using this word dilemma, which is actually highlighted in the marking scheme, might very well help you negotiate through this actual difficult consultation, this challenging patient who really, really wants something. So Mr. Smith, I appreciate that you really wanted to have the MRI scan today, and I can see that you're not 100% reassured by what I'm saying. But can I be honest with you, we've got a bit of a dilemma here. You see, with regards to the actual MRI scan, you've got to meet certain criteria, and these criteria aren't defined by me. They're actually defined by our guidance. And so we can't just refer under the NHS for a reassurance scan. So it's all about working through the dilemma of want versus need. And these dilemmas can often be depersonalised. In fact, if you start thinking about the CSA, a lot of it is about negotiation. And actually, some of these dilemmas might be defined by law. It could be the GMC, around, for example, confidentiality, capacity. It might be the DVLA. It might be the NHS itself. So the dilemma of want versus need. And this is absolutely key. But if you say no to something, you need to be nice, you need to be firm, you need to be fair, and you've got to have something else in the other hand to barter with, to negotiate with. Now, say for example, in this patient who's really stressed out with the headache, and actually you recognise that it's stress that's really actually causing a lot of his symptoms on the background of being worried about a brain tumour, then not only do you want to be giving reassurance, but actually saying there are lots of things that we can do to help. And if these things don't help, then actually an MRI might be an option. And certainly an MRI is an option if things get worse. So that's where your follow-up and your safety netting is coming into play. So if a patient comes in and says, I want an MRI scan, rather than saying you don't need it, why don't you perhaps approach it in this line, which is actually an MRI scan is an option if things don't get better. And it's at this point that you can then actually offer different options that are centered around how perhaps to deal with the stress or the actual symptom of the pain, for example, options that are actually validated and justified and in context to the narrative. But as part of this, your follow-up and safety net are absolutely key. A safety net encompasses, firstly, how do I know I'm right with my particular option? How do I know I'm wrong? And thirdly, what would I do at that point? And it's that point where an MRI, for example, might be an option. So do ensure that you are timelining everything. Remember that from our podcast, to start off with, we are looking at a journey from point A through to point B. So make sure that point B is also well defined. Okay, so that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this one. Do touch base with us on Facebook, Twitter, and the website. Over and out. Many thanks.